Hi, I'm Saturday Night Pumpkinhead, and Hornets by Horrorshow is one of my favorite horror games of all time. And it is a text game. More specifically, a Twine text game. Now, hear me out. I promise you it's still interesting, and I'm also going to be covering a 3D game in this video, more specifically Monastery, also by Horrorshow, which is related to Hornets. But before I go into both of these games, let me talk a little bit about what Twine even is, because from what I can gather, if you're not into game development or text games, you might not be familiar with this engine. Twine is a very beginner-friendly game engine that allows you to create small to big interactive text adventure games. I always loved text games as someone with limited hardware my whole life who still wanted to enjoy a good, well-written adventure choice-based game, so I was immediately hooked by the prospect. Now, Twine is an engine that allows you to do a lot within it. There are such Twine games as full RPGs which involve lore, and entire blogs to accompany them that offer a multitude of paths to choose within its writing, and then, of course, there's porn games. There are a lot of Twine porn games. Sure, I mean, full disclosure, I didn't play any of these games in depth to know if there are any weird things in them, but usually people like to disclose any uncomfortable topics in the description of the game themselves. So if you find anything, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to illustrate the genre. Now is as good a time as any to say that originally I was going to make a video entirely about Twine. I was going to cover hidden gems and things like that I like to do for this channel occasionally. However, I couldn't really bring myself to play any Twine games because one, there weren't any horror games, and apart from Stardew Valley and Hamtaro Hum Hum Heartbreak, which is genuinely one of my favorite games of all time, I'm not really interested in. And two, because I couldn't bring myself to lie, I feel like it'd be disingenuous to pretend that I was still involved with the genre that I very much got involved into 5 years ago to make 2 little indie games and then never touch again. Besides, it was just an excuse to talk about Hornets. I just love Hornets by Horrorshow. Now that we are done with engine explanations, I need to disclose that Hornets isn't really like one of these games that I mentioned before. It doesn't have any colorful scenarios, it doesn't have options for you to romance. It is a little strange claustrophobic game in which you, the protagonist, have destroyed the world. Has destroyed the world? Has, right? You probably already know the developer of Hornets, Horrorshow, from her masterpiece of horror, Anatomy, a game in which you go into a house that turns out to be a living and breathing organism. The thing that always stood out to me the most about Anatomy was its writing. I have a Google Doc saved for years with the entire tape monologue from this game, and I frequently quote it to myself. Horrorshow's writing borrows heavily from authors like Mary Shelley, H.P. Lovecraft, and Edgar Allan Poe, and the thing is that it is extremely difficult to emulate these authors in modern times without sounding entirely pretentious and completely fake, something that she never comes across as, no matter how purple her prose can get. Horrorshow has 3 3D games that I do recommend a lot, considering I am gonna go over one, and I especially got lost in this one called Leechbow, about a town that is fascinated and obsessed with blood. Apparently there is a barn. I never found a barn here, but I did find a bar with a radio that is playing this.
Do you remember some time ago in an Eastern scientific institution, they kept a piece of heart alive for weeks on end? Well, I got to thinking, what if that heart began to grow and grow and grow?
Hello? Hello, operator. Give me Mr. Regan, fast. Hello, Mr. Regan, this is Lewis. Listen, get me a rewrite, man. The thing's still growing. No, Chief, I tell you the truth, the corridor's choked with living, crawling flesh.
It's pretty cool. I spent a long time roaming the streets here the first time I played, and there are bottles of blood everywhere, which if you throw on the walls, sometimes you get cool, warm messages like this. Her games usually involve otherworldly dimensions and vague but clearly poignant lore involving some sort of mythology the characters, often unseen, believe in. She likes surreal atmospheres and eerie, uncanny valley experiences, so it makes sense that Hornets would be much the same, even if only in writing form. The reason why I know this game exists is that I couldn't play Anatomy or any of these games when I found out about them, not only because they are keyboard and mouse and I am a controller kind of girl, but because until this year I had the same dusty laptop laptop for the past 12 years, and none of this ran on it. So when I found out that she had a perfectly playable text-based game, I was elated. Then I played this thing 1,000 more times. Even this year, I went back to it when I was having a particularly bad day and I needed something to kind of comfort me. Look, I know it's weird that I take comfort in a game about hornets coming down upon a facsimile of humanity and basically tearing everything to shreds, but if you've been here before, are you really surprised? And if you haven't, hi, welcome. I like horror a lot. Now is the obligatory time in the video in which I urge you to pause and play this game yourself, as it will be in the description along with the other one, and it is fast enough you can probably finish it in 10 to 15 minutes if you want to be really thorough with it. Kitty Horrorshow is also absolutely worth a look at, as to me she is one of the quintessential indie horror developers, and I mean that. If you like horror, take a look at More Than Anatomy and you'll find something you enjoy, I promise. So, what is Hornets like? You begin with a simple black screen with all the applicable trigger warnings, so take heed of those. You click the option at hand, and like I said, it is your fault the world is ending, but you don't know why or how yet. After you click on the second option, there is an array of new paths that delineate a city, and of course, Kitty Horrorshow's characteristic writing style. I won't read every single description here, only the important ones, so here's more incentive for you to go and play this thing yourself. Here we go. Okay, I'm gonna have to wait for the bird to leave. Actually, something else I like to say is that the game says that it contains music. It doesn't contain music, it's completely silent, so I'm assuming that the flapping of wings, like we will see in Monastery, would be the soundtrack for this game. I always just assumed that, so okay. Clearly, we are in a world apart from our own. The black vastness is a common theme in Kitty Horrorshow games and horror in general, obviously. The perpetual night being a very oppressive thing by itself, which I like because I have mild aphantasia. Everything is nearly black in my head all the time, so very easy for me to visualize. 10 out of 10. The architecture of the place is also strange, with the buildings basically merging into each other and themselves. Cool. Two of the options on screen, the enter a building and wander the streets ones, lead to different scenarios every time you click on them, which is something I didn't know the first few times I explored, so it is important to highlight if you're still interested in playing the game yourself. I especially like this one. It makes me sad, but at least they died together, so. When you enter a building, you also find out you're not the only one in town not bleeding to death, which is happy fun times. You go to the market next and find out that most people who lived here were artisans and polytheists. I read this twice and I still don't know how to say this word. Polytheists? Polytheistas. That's the word in Portuguese. It's similar enough, but I don't know. And they served a pantheon of gods, you know, because that's what polytheist means. Whatever. You see that there are dozens of bodies, most of them punctured by stingers or eviscerated by chitinous jaws, and are strewn across the square. Nearly every stall is a splintered ruin. Hornets circle and hover overhead or cling motionlessly. This was almost a perfect read. Hornets circle and hover overhead or cling motionlessly to the nearby city walls, which is nice. And then you grab an ink brush. Yay, that's the market. In the plaza, you are introduced to the city square, where the streets are made of triangles of colored glass, which is about the coolest thing I've ever heard, and also the closest thing to the classic mosaic/caquinho Brazilian floors I've ever seen in a game, or a horror game, so I dig. Except that when the moons went over the streets and people danced on top of it or poured wine on the glass, it sang, mirroring their happiness. With only blood to drink, though, the glass is wailing. You continue. You have places to be, and no one to hold you back now that they're all either dead or writhing on the floor. You can go to the gates and try to escape this doomsday, but you find the guard slouched in a chair, trying to keep his entrails from leaving his body through a hole in his stomach. He looks to you and coughs, groans, and gurgles. You can't do anything here yet, spoilers, so you go back. In the temple district, the first option is the oracle, which if you go to, you will find the last living elder invoker of the religion the locals and yourself practiced. You have murdered us all, he says. We had such hopes for you. The ink so loved you. You could nearly hear it singing, but you have murdered us. For what? For what? Now, if you click on for what, you'll be taken to all of these different options. It doesn't matter which one you click because they lead to the same inevitable end. The elder spits at you. Then, in an instant, without sound, the hornet's mandibles are around the elder's middle. Without sound, the hornet's mandibles slice the elder in half. The body topples, blood and viscera fanning out across the candlelit marble. The hornet lifts off again and departs. Now that the elder is dead, we have an opportunity to examine the room at hand. There are several statues of different gods, and you can consider all of them for a little more insight into the lore of this game and these people's religion. The statue of Hate is the most important though, for she still wears the glyph you drew upon her. Your sigil abstracted the words death, swarm, and wings and night into one single drawing, which is an actual type of magical practice in the real world as well. You are apparently among the most gifted. The next screen details your thoughts after you did the irreparable damage, how the anger left your body and you regretted it almost immediately. There were maybe 3 seconds where you might have undone it, might have stopped everything, but they had not taught you how to erase. There is no such thing as impermanent ink. Considering that Hate is the goddess of fury, plague, wings, death, and stinging insects, you basically made a request for death to the best person ever. You get out and back to the temple district and into the apothecary to find that the ink is made from toxins coming from wasps that implant trees, the so-called blood of the city. You find some of that sweet ink, which strangely matches your resonance, and you take it with you. You go to the library now, the only place without bodies, as everyone ran home and to their families instead of there. If you go to the scriptorium, you learn that you were trained from an early age to paint glyphs and that these had immense power. Clearly. We also learned that the elders usually held their secrets tight, believing that the stability of the city relied on their reluctance to spread knowledge, which is an interesting way to run a city that is basically made on top of ink and language. You then snap the hinge off of a case and retrieve a long withheld glyph, which is for fire. If you go back to the gatehouse now, a different option appears to take the guard out of his misery by drawing the glyph of death onto his forehead. You then open the gates and move through the fields, then to the path, then to the hills, all the way to the Towers of Signal, another of the gods. The Towers of Signal, where he struck the earth and filled the air with soundless noise, and where ink made love to him and gave birth to the language. Each one is as wide as the oracle at its base, and each stretches so high that one must look straight up to see the top. Each is covered in tumescent papery growths, nests, virulent and unnatural, all of them bubbling with massive newborn hornets. They ignore you. All of the others are dead. Here and in the city, you are alone with the hornets. Here, among the feet of the towers, you are alone with the hive. You have the components to burn it. So you decide that it is your duty to end what you have started. You draw a glyph onto the tower, feeling all of your power at your fingertips. Nothing happens. Above, the hornets are laughing. Above, the hornets are breeding. Above, the hornets are multiplying. Above, Hate is watching her children spread out across the surface of the earth like an infection, and watching one tiny creature with a brush attempting to use the gods' own gifts against her. But of course the gods cannot be killed by their own weapons, and so she laughs. And that's how it ends. I believe that this is the only ending to this game, but if you go to the gardens and to the wishing well, you find the statuette of a dolphin that I never found out why. You know? I went everywhere with that thing. I even thought that you could kill Hate with it for some reason. I was like, oh, maybe you can draw a glyph. And you know, Hate's like, oh, you can't kill me with like cartoons, blah, blah, blah. But this is like an otherworldly thing. Dolphins are not a common thing in this town or, you know, in this dimension. So I was like, maybe, you know, it could be done. But no. No, I have no idea what the dolphin statue is for. I have no clue. Okay, now let's take a detour and look at its either sequel or sister game, the Haunted Cities Volume 2 game, Monastery, before we go to my conclusions about this, because Everyone's dying to hear about my opinion on this. In Monastery, you are in, guess, a monastery, completely trapped with the main doors blocked from the outside, which is interesting. If you have seen my Outlast video, which I cannot recommend enough, cough cough, you already know that I am someone who is completely directionless, and this game is basically a labyrinth. The halls look the same, and the only thing to guide you are the little signs on the wall that actually took me ages to realize I could click on. I knew it. I knew I could, but I didn't try because I was so entranced by the game that I forgot, and then I kept entering the wrong rooms. It was great. So I'm actually not going to be showing you my first playthrough, but my second. Actually, my third, because I also fumbled the second. Because I went back and forth so much, I got tired, and then in the first time, I ended up looking for a walkthrough on YouTube after 1 hour in a game that, if you know what you were doing, can be done in like 10 to 15 minutes. If it wasn't for this person, Mutant Rats, I'd still be wondering. And now I can always say that I watched Mutant Rats play Monastery by Kitty Horrorshow, which is truly a sentence that is not in the Bible. 10 out of 10. Before we truly go in, again, here's my pitch for it. The game comes in the Haunted Cities Volume 2 pack if you want to play for yourself. The atmosphere is fantastic. There is absolutely no sound other than the sound of doors opening, wings outside, and a little bit of fire, which absolutely adds to the feel of something jumping onto you at any moment, which doesn't happen because Kitty Horrorshow is usually better than that. The controls are also not mouse dependent. You use the arrow keys to go forward or backwards and to look around yourself, with page down and page up to look up and down, which I love because the thing I have against playing things with the keyboard and mouse is the fact that I never really adapted to the mouse itself. So great. Also, content warnings for this game include body horror, insects, blood, and gore. But if you made it to here, you're probably okay with all of that. So moving on. You begin Monastery literally in the middle of the place. No explanation. In front of you is a door labeled Garden, and if you go through it, you see a statue of Hate, Mother of the Hive, staring at you. To the side there is a cemetery with 4 different graves, one of them with no label. Cool. You go back inside, and there aren't really any rules on where you can go first, but the places that are open at the moment are the dormitory, the refectory, and the scriptorium, with the library, the infirmary, and the chapel locked away, along with this door right here that doesn't have a lock or a knob. In the refectory, you can get a knife to stab the food, quote-unquote food, on the table, which gives you a key to the infirmary. Inside of the scriptorium, you can read several different notes, again highlighting Kitty Horrorshow's writing style, and when you come to the book, you have several of these in a row. You can pause to read them if you want. After you read all of them, a key to the library falls off. When I entered the dormitory, I also got this. This is a random event that can happen or not, and in my first playthrough, I didn't see this one. I saw another. So anyway, inside the dormitory, you find a note about a brother Lumbricus, the same person who is buried on the first grave outside, who apparently didn't have a good enough change and didn't really take to the transformation these people go through so well, so he had to be killed off. So one thing I didn't mention before is that in the refectory, you can get this list of things that people have been eating in the monastery, and you can deduce that this transformation is the reason why they're like eating worms and leeches and dirt. To encourage the becoming of something other than human, a vessel for Hate to kill things and beings she doesn't like. This already paints a good enough picture of why the main character of Hornets chose her to bore their rage and why they did it in the first place. Moving on, you find a key within one of the chests to the chapel. With the 3 keys needed to open the 3 locked doors, you can do it in any order you feel like. Going to the infirmary first, though. Great. You open the door and find... one of the chrysales seems shriveled. Maybe it is another one who didn't fit Hate's demands of what it is to be one of her kind. On the walls, there are artworks of humans conjoined with animals, and on the writing desk, there is a letter of how all the indoctrinations went well enough, but there is some concern about a brother's service. Yeah, he just died. On the table, a knife. Every time you pick up a knife in this game, the main door text changes, presumably. I don't think I got all of them, but I did get this one and some other ones that I'm gonna show accordingly. Leaving the infirmary, you can go to the library, where there is another book, a note of a ritual to change the color of the sky, and a secret passage to another knife. If you check the door now, you will see this. So, this game could have happened directly after Hornets, though it seems like the cult that lived in this monastery was also preparing a ritual ritual to bring hate to Earth, which is now in progress, which explains her befalling over the ones who locked them there in the first place. After this, you can go to the chapel, where instead of a knife, you get a trowel. Trowel? I've never seen this word in my life. There is a proper order to this, by the way. The doors are close to one another, but I am writing this from memory, so if I am failing at giving optimized instructions, it is because I haven't yet learned how to speedrun Monastery by Kitty Horrorshow and get that sweet sub 10 minutes. If you go back outside in the garden and the statue follows you with her body, by the way, I didn't mention this the first time, but she does, you can dig up the unlabeled grave and find one of the knives you need. If you dig up the other graves, you'll find halfway transformations, including Brother Lumbricus. If you check the door again, you'll find that everyone has perished outside. I swear to God, the first time I played this game, I made a joke akin to "that's what you get for disrespecting people's religious beliefs," even though I think I too would have disrespected a cult that worshipped a goddess literally named Hate and demanded their followers be locked up, indoctrinated, and modified to fit their views of the world and of their goddess. You have no idea how many times I try to go back and stab the statue with the knives I had been given because I genuinely thought that stabbing Hate would be the only way to end the game. It's not. Turns out that with the knives in hand, you can go back to the last closed door of the game and stick them into the door slits. The door will open and lead you into the schoolroom and outside. If you turn around, there is no monastery, by the way, so this is either in another dimension or Kitty Horrorshow didn't have the budget for a full-blown structure here, which I respect and also understand. The sound here is overwhelming, by the way. It is a stark contrast. So, you do the only thing you can do in this situation and you start walking forward. So that's how this game ends. It just closes. I really wish that I had recorded my reaction to it. I'm telling you, like, this game... I'm always looking at my script, by the way. I don't know how much of it I'm gonna be able to cut. Me just like... This game's fantastic. It's so good. I just like horror games so much, man. I don't know what to say. Okay, so what the fuck, right? Originally, I was not going to try and add a definitive meaning or interpretation to these games because I think that they are meant to be experienced viscerally and each person can have their own feelings about them, good or bad. If I had to say something for Monastery, it was that it was an anxiety-inducing experience, and if you have been to my channel before, even though I have privated some movie videos, you know I'm not really afraid of horror games or movies because they're my favorite genre, and I play Outlast and looked like this for most of the game. But it doesn't mean I don't get wary, and this game, oh boy, it made me very nervous. If I got jump scared here, which I knew I wasn't gonna, but if I did, I would have screamed, and it was 3 a.m., and I would have woken everybody up. It is a very, very good game. She describes it in her notes as unpolished, and I disagree. I love it just the way it is. Okay, now that that's over, let me add an explanation to something I think has to be experienced viscerally because I have my own opinion of it. In both games, Hornets and Monastery, there are people who are seemingly happy, but are actually being fed specific and exclusionary information. In Hornets, it is highlighted in the library that the elders withheld the information from the population and they thought that their town's stability hinged on that, which is a major red flag, right? In Monastery, in the infirmary, what they do is blatantly called indoctrination. Hate herself seems to be the worst of the gods. Some of the other gods are about language, music, beauty, invention, and Hate is a goddess who considers humans to be below her and takes revenge on those who don't fit in. Also, it's interesting that in Hornets, I noticed this while I was like recording the script, there are tumescent growths in the towers of Signal, and Signal is like the originator, like him and Ink made love and created language, and that in itself is not a bad thing, but the fact that hate took language and made it into her own thing, it's very interesting, isn't it? If you take Monastery to be a sequel to Hornets, it could be that the people that lived in the town the main character lived in locked these people away, boarding their monastery afraid of them. In this interpretation, it becomes a little trickier to figure out who is bad or who is good. Exclusion exists on both sides, both go onto the extremes. The people in the monastery find solace in one another and are a minority that rises against the punishers. That being said, I think that wasn't the case, considering the elders in town in Hornets seem more alike to the ones in Monastery than not, and because after all, hate was one of the gods worshipped. Also, in the options you have as to why you destroyed everything, several of them are either because you deserve this or because I, for going along with this for so long, also deserve it. You can take the other approach, which is to claim that you did it because you could, dismantling this society who seems to indulge in this withdrawal of information and choices by using their hate against them. I mean, the main character seems to be but a vessel for the ink, an instrument to be used for the writing of sigils and nothing more. It makes sense that after a while they will notice that their entire existence comes down to that. You could also say that the glyph that the elders hide, being the glyph for fire, is indicative that they were afraid that people would rebel against them and destroy their world. Still, it wasn't necessary because someone went there and destroyed things with, death. Like that Robert Frost poem, Fire and Ice. Some say the world would end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, hold with those who favor fire. But if you had to perish twice, I think you know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great, it would suffice. I have no idea how shocked I was when I found out that that's a poem the Bella Swan reads at the beginning of Eclipse. I was like, hey, I can recite that one from memory. You can't do this to me. Anyway, killing everyone was the wrong thing to do because though hate and anger can cradle, sometimes you can't extinguish the fire and you become the same as those who cast you out. I mean, the main character's hate abandoned them as soon as they wrote the sigil and they were left with only regret and horror. Okay, I'm gonna go on one of my weird Saturn tangents here and give a weird example to illustrate what I mean. In Lisa Frankenstein, Lisa Swallows is a girl who goes through a lot and basically becomes a darker, though honest and confident version of herself as the movie goes. This is irrelevant. What is relevant is that Lisa was always the outcast, which became worse after her mother's murder. Now, Taffy was Lisa's stepsister, her father having married another woman very soon after Lisa's mother died, and Taffy is the opposite of Lisa. She is extroverted, confident, a cheerleader, all of that. The thing is that throughout the movie, Taffy is the only person other than the creature who consistently reaches out to Lisa in any emotional way and tries to get her outside to socialize, lest she becomes more and more reclusive and depressed. Taffy, however, is rebuked by Lisa, who treats her in a cordial but nowhere near as warm way. In the end, when all is said and done, Lisa reveals that the reason why she didn't want Taffy around her was because she was like everyone who had bullied and excluded Lisa. She then apologizes for not seeing that Taffy was genuine in her affection for her and gives her her beaded rosary, which was previously her deceased mother's, and which Taffy wears even after the traumatic final events Lisa proved her true, as proof that she genuinely loved her sister despite everything and through it all. I think it's obvious why this is relevant here, but it's because Lisa ended up being the one who couldn't see Taffy for who she was based on her own prejudice, which is valid to an extent considering the trauma she withstood. Still, to further illustrate the example, I do feel like Lisa is someone who I can see calling to the statue of a goddess named Hate, only to see her kind and upbeat sister be killed by the sting and venom of the Hornets she wanted so badly. In the movie itself, one of the resident goth girls, who is seemingly someone who would get along with Lisa, if all movie stereotypes are to be believed, was actually an antagonist and someone who disliked her from the start and wanted her gone. In the end, it is important to go against those who will oppress and subdue us. I don't necessarily encourage an entirely passive approach to life. I think if people bully or treat you horribly, standing up for yourself is absolutely valid and I'll never hold it against anyone. Like, for example, in this gift set of Bring It On, I reblogged on my Tumblr, which I already shared with the world anyways, who cares. I put on the tag that Isis, the Clover's captain, should have resorted to violence, but I was also sort of wrong, because if she did it at that exact moment, she'd be going up against Torrance, who didn't know that her previous captain had been stealing the Clover's cheer routines, which, spoilers by the way for the movie Bring It On from I think 1999. So yeah, I still think they should have burned Big Red's car down in PJS style or something. In any case, I am still through it all someone who grew up around very different people from myself. My very sister and I are opposites, literally like Taffy and Lisa. And though I am someone who likes horror to a preternatural degree and dresses like Ebony Darkness, Dementia Raven way, I actually relate more to Taffy. because I am generally extroverted and open to people. I mean, listen, this is the most basic point ever made. Let's be friends through our differences. Woo! But like nowadays, it's more needed than ever, right? You know, like I was thinking, like, is the main character of Hornets an evil person? Are they like someone who like destroyed people for petty reasons? It seems like it, right? But from the options, I was like, maybe, you know, they lived in a secluded place, kind of like a cult town, and they were tired of being brought down by it. But like, you can't really destroy people with their own tools, the tools that they use to destroy you. Maybe don't worship hate. Maybe that's the point. Isn't art beautiful? Isn't art the best thing in the world? Because like, it's I've been thinking about this for ages. Anyway, the point is, I think these games can be taken at face value or be interpreted in a multitude of different ways. Mine perhaps not being the most accurate of them. Kitty Horrorshow always highlights in her thank you notes that her games are very personal to her. These games are exploratory, deeply psychological works that are meant to be experienced along with her. We are being given passage to her own other world, and I hope I did any of this justice because I genuinely love her work. Anatomy is one of my favorite haunted house works along with Rose Red, and probably one of my favorite games period. And like I said, I play Hornets all the time. Even though the other Twine games I highlighted in the first portion are more involved aesthetically, to me Hornets remains the best Twine game I have ever played, and to me it is a masterpiece. I think that if you like horror, you already know that you should play these, also because I said it throughout the video. So I'm not gonna repeat myself. They're very unique and beautiful and definitely worth a look. Anyway, I've been Saturday Night Pumpkinhead. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye! I'm hitting my microphone a lot. Recording my face for a YouTube video is a wild experience. Hope you're enjoying it.